Welcome all. Talking about mental health and mental well being is one of the most important issues in today's era. And to cast light on this matter, I welcome our moderator, Ms. Devika Dharam, mental health advocate. She has an experience of 30 plus years across different geographies and sectors and has been founding and understanding what organizations need to do in the long term to provide psychological safety at workplace and a positive work culture. That is indeed a very important topic, ma'am. With ma'am, I would like to also invite Dr. Harish Shetty, leading psychiatrist, who is the founder of Maitri, an organization that works with families affected by mental illness and has been instrumental in training a large number of medical personnel in the field of mental health. Sir has also been identified as one of the 17 young mental health workers by the World Health Organization and invited twice for training in the years of 1995 and 96, respectively. I also welcome our second speaker, Dr. Ravi, trustee, Ashwasan Foundation, and chief innovator, CEO, EpiAnax. This foundation brings forward Ashwasan Science, that is, the science of human mechanism, an experience as it was created to be. This is surely going to be an insightful session, and now the stage is all yours, dear panelist. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Isha, for that generous introduction of all of us. It's my privilege to be the moderator this afternoon with Dr. Harish and with Ravi Ramamurthy. Today's session is about owning and humanizing the mental health elephant in the room, right? Um, so, one thing this pandemic has done really is to bring conversations around mental health to the foreground, right? It's sort of spotlighted it. And organizations are at last recognizing that their employees' mental health has a direct impact on productivity and organizational wellness, so to speak, right? So, um, just I'm not a professional or an expert like my panelists are, but just two lines about what is mental health really as we understand it and why we are calling it the elephant in the room. um, I think regardless of how open we are to talking about other people's mental health, we are all as human beings reluctant to talk about our own mental health, right? Somewhere there is this block about talking about our own mental health for some reason, and that's why we're calling it the elephant in the room, because unless people start talking about it, it will it will always be something that happens to somebody else and never to me, right? So until we get past that barrier, really the way forward is not very clear, right? So Dr. Harish, if I could start with you, please, and request you to tell us how, as not as people who are not mental health professionals, how can we understand our own mental health? uh, can you tell us in a way that will help us to understand and accept it as part of our lives and not as some scary unknown thing?
Absolutely. I think good mental health, there's nothing like normal mental health, but mental health is all about being able to deal with oneself and the environment reasonably. You may have ups and downs, you may be angry, sad, upset, happy, joyous, tearful sometimes, but overall you're able to deal with yourself and the people around you, balance within self and around you. And when is the tipping point? Tipping points are two: strain of the mind and fracture of the mind. Strain of the mind, when you're upset, your promotions are not as expected, your appraisals were bad, you're asked to leave, salary cut, family is in trouble, and then you are in distress. And you meet your friends, you meet your colleagues, you meet your HR, and calm down, you go for a vacation, and that is strain of the mind. But when the distress is so much that it affects your relationships with others, it affects your productivity and your work, it affects your daily life, and it can affect various aspects of your life. And then you need to meet a friendly neighborhood, good psychologist or a psychiatrist or your family doctor. That's the time you need to be very careful, look at what is happening around you. So anybody can fall mentally ill, and all of us are responsible to take care of our mental health. Just like we speak about physical hygiene, emotional hygiene is very important. Just like we speak about financial wealth, emotional wealth is also as important. So
Hmm.
taking care of the mind and the body together day to day is a responsibility and an activity which all of us should indulge. And last line is that we are in difficult times. We have fought three world wars. I'm not talking about the Ukraine conflict, COVID one, COVID two, COVID three, and the mountain of globalization. Globalization disconnects, and brain has not changed its size, shape, structure, chemistry, volume, or whatever. No. But distress is increasing. So one thing, my dear friends, start reconnecting to bring down distress.
Wow, thank you. I think that's a one light that has come on, that globalization is leading to disconnects, and I guess that's because of technology and the increase in our ability to connect without actually uh, without actually connecting. Right? It's a surface level connect. So we'll come back to that in a little bit, Dr. Harish, because that's a really interesting point that I would like to speak a little bit more on. Um, Ravi, I understand that your area of expertise is positive psychology, right? So, given what Dr. Harish is saying about, we got to take this into our own hands and be cognizant of our mental health being as important as physical health to us. Um, could you help us understand what are the things that create those mental blocks, which make us so reluctant to look at some of the things that are actually very much a part of our everyday lives?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, thanks, Devika, and thanks, Dr. Harish, for doing a very interesting perspective. So, I mean, at the outset, Devika, you talked about positive psychology. I just want to correct that. I represent an organization called Ashwasan Science, and just 2 minutes about what we do, so that will give clarity to what I'm going to talk. Ashwasan Science is a spiritual science organization that was founded by Rashmi Ayyappa.
Mm-hmm.
So the two phenomena that we talk about is called life force mechanism and timeless phenomena. So Rashmi Ayyappa was born with this knowledge, and she could see past, present, future in a multi-dimensional manner, and she could see the root cause of what are the problems, what is the root cause, what is the cause and effect cycle. So we call that as a life force mechanism, right? So I don't want to get into any details there. People can visit our website and get more details. But in a nutshell, if I want to explain it in a layman's term, let me explain this, right? And Dr. Harish would agree with me that there is nothing called physical health and mental health. They are all one. There's one health. I mean, if we are unwell, if we are sick, it will affect our mind. If you are sick in our mind, it will affect our body. So it's a classification that we have given, number one. The second point, if at all you want to talk about the brain, and if you look at two aspects, right? One is the brain chemistry, and then you look at the neuron connections in our brain. And when you talk of brain chemistry, you talk of serotonin, you talk of oxytocin, you talk of all those chemicals which create a particular brain environment. Right? Now, this brain environment can be changed by a genes. 80 to 85% of a genetic manifestation is not manifested, is silent. And you would be surprised of the capability of the human being. We can unlock them. You must, I mean, Dr. Harish, you would have, I mean, you're a doctor, probably you're aware. A terminal cancer patient becomes okay. I mean, these are remission cases of remission, but this is the miracle of the human being where a gene can suddenly express itself, create a protein or create chemicals which can alter and bring back the human mechanism to its original state. So that happens at a very, very subtle level. How does the gene change itself? That is at the subatomic level. And we call that as the subtle life force. So Ashwasan science impacts life at the subtle life force, and all change, all transformation lies at the level of subtlety, right? Now, when you talk of mental health, Devika, you talked about, okay, it's an elephant in the room. Yes, people are scared because one is there's a stigma, right, to mental health. I mean, I don't want to be called as a person who's suffering from mental health issues.
Hmm.
That's one aspect. But a bigger aspect, and Dr. Harish should have seen it, is if I'm afflicted by problems, I don't know what to do about it. I think just like physical health, it has come from outside. It's a virus, it's a bacteria. So I'm feeling upset. I mean, I can't imagine that actually I am the cause of it, not the environment.
Hmm.
I am the primary cause of my mental health. My others may be triggers, but you are the master of your health. When you look at it that way, the whole universe changes, because then you know the next question is, what can I do? How can I get out of it? Right? So it is the sense of being powerless, sense of being a victim to external situations and environment around us, that makes us so weak and feel so fragile, feel so hopeless, Devika. So at Ashwasan, this is our mission. And of course, we have worked with many thousands of mental health individuals, psychiatric, psychological, or psychological, issues
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
problems.
Hmm.
But the whole aspect is one of bringing this back. You are the master. You
Right.
have self-healing capabilities.
So, what I'm understanding from you is we have to start with some self awareness,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
That's at the core of
Absolutely.
uh, all education about what's going on with me and why these things are happening, right?
Absolutely.
And to look at an internal locus of control really rather than an external locus of control. That's really what I'm understanding from
Very well put.
what
Very
you
well
do
put.
at Ashwasan.
Very
Yeah.
well put, Devika. Very.
And I'm really glad to see that there is an organization that is taking this as the core of what they do and taking it
Yes.
forward. I think it'll be much easier for clinicians to actually do their work effectively if people come to them with that basic self awareness that yes, there is something amiss, and I have the power to correct this, maybe with a little help
Yes,
from the outside world, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So, given this now, I'm given that, okay, we need to get to that point of self awareness, right? Now, what do you think we can do, Ravi, to address this elephant in the room, as it were?
Okay. I mean, if I go a little deeper, I mean, we talked about
Just
one
a
is.
couple of points, then I'll go to Dr. Harish
Yeah,
also about
sure,
it.
sure,
Yeah.
sure. I mean, we talked about brain chemistry. That's another aspect. But our neuronal structure, we think that's all hardwired, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think Dr. Harish probably is a much better expert in this. I mean, we hear of neuroplasticity. That means our brain is extremely elastic. Now, what
Yeah.
is that elasticity? It means the neuronal connections are extremely dynamic, and it is in our control, right? And what is the neuronal dynamics? So, for example, my beliefs, my conditioning, my pattern, what I went through as a child. For example, as a child, let's say I was always put down, and my parents were always criticizing me. So my sense of self-worth suffers. So
Yes.
I grow with a self-belief that I'm not good enough. And then you translate that into work environment.
Hmm.
If my boss criticizes me, I take it personally. I don't take it objectively.
Yeah.
So our mental health is a function of our conditioning, of our pattern, of our beliefs. So we need to look at them, right? And we can change them. It is possible to change them of our own accord. And we talked about self-awareness, right? That's the first
Yeah.
tool. But you can go deeper and deeper in self-awareness, and as
Hmm.
you go deeper, you get into an introspective stage, and maybe that I will talk later, maybe after Dr. Harish also shares his views, and you can actually impact them.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I can see this neuroplasticity has so much of power. So when you're saying it is attitude, it is our own beliefs, and it is our will to do things differently,
And our
and
conditioning,
our
right?
conditioning. Okay, yeah, okay. So, Dr. Harish, would you like to say a few words about what Ravi has shared with us from a
Absolutely, absolutely.
science point of view?
Absolutely. I think Ravi really spoke about holistic health. Let me let me share two dichotomies or two parallels that run in our lives.
Mm,
Awareness is a must, but a man who's running at a pace, thanks for globalization, with all the vision and the mission of the companies, bottom lines are important. And how do we balance these two things? So, number one, let me pay obeisance to Rishi Patanjali and Bhagwan Buddha for giving us yoga and vipassana. They are awareness journeys. And awareness journeys can be a million. And each one of us can choose any music,
mm,
dance, singing, etc. So the journey of awareness, as Ravi said beautifully, has to continue all our lives at all times. Yoga and Vipassana are two methods. Having said this, what is the reality? The reality that is facing us is 10% increase in suicides in the country in 2020 from 2019, highest jump.
yeah.
What are we facing? We are facing one out of three people who end their life by suicide have family problems. One out of four people who end their life by suicide have are poor daily wage laborers. One out of seven people who are in India are mentally ill, according to the Minister of Health 2019. Niman said 1 out of 10. Big numbers. So, in our office spaces, do we have a mental health policy? In our office spaces, in our corporates, is there evolution to break that to really break that elephant in the room, which means if a CEO is unwell, will he come down and say, I am taking my treatment for depression?
Mm,
If an MD is unwell, would he come down and say, I am taking the treatment for depression? That's how we break stigma. I think that's a long way, because one of the illnesses of in the mind, depression, is very cunning. It is invisible and not easily understood.
mm,
So my last submission is, as Ravi said beautifully, that we can write new programs. Neurogenesis is possible at all ages, not only till the age of 18. Awareness journey has to continue because the wealth of awareness is in the East, especially in India. There are million roads. And the second is there a fracture? Should I treat myself early? Can an awareness journey treat a fracture? A severely depressed person cannot do yoga.
mm.
A severely depressed or mentally ill person cannot do yoga. So I think we need to pay attention on both sides. The burden of mental illness is huge in India. And if companies and HRs focus on this is not about pampering or pandering, but it would actually increase productivity. 21 disabilities in the PWD Act, one of them is mental illness.
So thank you for those statistics were shocking, frankly, but I think it needs to be that shocking for us to really wake up and pay attention to it, right? um, when you're saying mental illness to Dr. Harish, I think I would like us to also talk about, when you're saying mental health, there is a spectrum of mental health, isn't it? So there's good health, and there's this whole spectrum up to poor health. And just like with physical health, if you stay in that poor health area for too long, then your tendency to fall into illness also is high, like
Yeah.
with physical health. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
I'll just say one line. As Ravi said, mind and the body is talking to each other. Though there's no mind and the body, it's all one. The constant conversation is happening. And what is very important is when you really focus on the mind, body improves. And when you focus on the body, mind improves. So one simple example, enough
Very
data to suggest that yoga promotes positive psychology. Enough data to suggest that simple exercise is a great stress buster and also can help treat mild depression. So there are simple things which we all need to do in our companies,
Yeah.
in our corporates to really promote mental health. But be alert to somebody who's unwell, be compassionate, be inclusive, and act immediately and not too late. And be kind and not pass
So
statements.
what you're talking about really is creating a culture of psychological safety, really, in the
Awareness.
workplace, right?
Awareness.
And I
Absolutely.
love the word compassion, Dr. Harish. I really love that word. That's
Psychological safety and psychological vigilance.
So can you help us to understand some of the things that we as individuals can do, be how we should behave, or things that we can do that would contribute to that sense of psychological safety and help us to be more vigilant, for yourself as well as for other people at the workplace. And then
Absolutely.
Ravi, I'll ask you to add your
sure,
points
sure,
to this
sure,
question as well, please.
sure.
Thank you, Devika. First is your daily journey in your office or at home.
Mm-hmm.
Transparency, honesty about your feelings, using your prefrontal cortex rather than your amygdaloid body. In simple ways, prefrontal cortex helps you to discern, amygdaloid helps you to explode. But calming down the amygdaloid and helping the prefrontal cortex to take charge is something we need to do. At the same time, if you're upset, well, even if he's your boss or your subordinate, it's good to go and say, I would like to have a chat with you 2 minutes. I would like to share my feelings, not my opinion. Huh? Opinions only to make money, feelings to improve mental health. So that is one important exercise we need to do. Number two is being as transparent as you can inside your family life, as transparent as you can, and accepting that you might goof up. And if somebody points the finger and tells you, "I didn't like the way you said, or you felt, or you did," accept it with grace. I'll give you an example. Last sentence, Devika. We are largely feudal in our country. There's a family guy, top guy, family head, and he's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to bear all the things. But I would like to tell all the family heads and all the CEOs and everybody, there are big pillars, there are middle pillars, and there are small pillars.
Mm-hmm.
All pillars are equally responsible or alert to help the big pillar to understand that this is not what I like and this is what I like. So democratization in the family and democratization in the workplace, where people can come and tell you, see, this is what I loved what you said in the meeting, but this is this
Yeah.
this sentence you said that you're useless, didn't like. I see in the COVID era, Devika, real last sentence, all the MBA knowledge and all the HR gyan lost. And the boss is saying brutally, I want results. I want targets.
Yeah.
And so
So
stressed.
then, why would somebody be open, right? If they are, if it is, if they don't feel safe saying what they feel.
Absolutely. So there's a myth that if you are open, your productivity goes down. Wrong. If the CEO is open and MD is open, productivity will increase, and work ethics will improve, and workplace health will
So
actually improve.
big message there that it is top down. It has to be leader driven, and they have to walk the talk. Yeah, that's a big message, Dr. Harish. Thank you, Ravi.
Yeah, and very wonderfully put, Dr. Harish. I mean, thanks for the sharing those thoughts from you. But when I would like to bring one more perspective in addition to what you just said. When we talk of psychological safety, it's very similar to a car safety, right? You're driving the Maruti car. I mean, I remember during those days we used to drive an Omni van. I think if you don't remember, this is like a snub-nosed one, and it was so fragile. So I mean, I can't talk of safety if I'm traveling in an Omni van, right? So I have to have the right equipment, the right paraphernalia. I have to have the resilience inside me for a safe environment. Number one. Point number two: every victim is also a perpetrator.
Mm.
A boss is reporting somebody else. So a boss is a subordinate to somebody else, and there's somebody else who's reporting to him or her. So there are two sides of the same coin. So when you talk of safety, I liked what Dr. Harish said. He talked about emotions. I would like to go a little bit deeper on that and say there are two aspects that we have to keep in mind. One, we are all used to having emotions bottled up right from
Mm,
childhood, unresolved emotions right from childhood. And it is these unresolved emotions which create conditioning, which create patterns, which create so many things, right? So, for example, I'm afraid to express. My boss tells me something, and Dr. Hari said that, but I'm afraid to express because if I go to my boss and tell him something or tell her something, I'm fearful that I may lose my job. And I'm thinking
mm,
now, if I lose my job, what about the security of my family? What about the EMI? What about that installment? So I'm living a very, very emasculated life. So I'm living by fear. I'm living by fear of expression. I'm living by fear of my life. I have anger, but I bottle up my anger and I show it at my wife or my husband when I go
mm.
back home. So we are seeing an interplay of emotions which are not finding vent. Emotions, when they don't find vent, are very toxic. They are like stale bread. They are stale emotions. They can be there in your body and do damage to your body and affect your mind and affect your mental health, affect your resilience. So you are no longer psychologically safe, right? And
Yeah.
you may perpetrate that to others. So one aspect most important is do not let emotions be staying inside you. Don't be afraid of expressing emotions in the right way. And of course, if you feel angry, don't go and hit that person. You have to
Mm.
figure out what is the right way of expressing that
Yeah.
emotion. That's
Yeah.
one. And second thing at Ashwasan, we say that, and we kind of help people through that, is for every situation, there's a right action and many wrong actions. So there is something called righteousness. We usually can't generalize, but for every specific situation, there's right, many wrongs. If
Hmm.
we do the right things at the right time, we probably will be physically healthy, mentally healthy, and so it's just simply that doing the right thing at the right time.
So, Ravi, you talked earlier about neuroplasticity and rewiring. So, can we actually retrain the brain then to new paths of thought? So,
Yes.
we've seen people who've had like disastrous things happen to them, right? But they continue to have such a positive attitude, and they're like an inspiration to other people. So, what are those people doing differently that enables them to do this? How come some people burn out and some people bounce back?
Yeah, I mean I mean there are a lot of other aspects involved, Devika and Dr. Harish and the medical. Rather than they can throw a lot of light in terms of their composition, genetic composition, and so on and so forth. But I can tell you, I mean, we had many people come to Ashwasan. I can't, of course, give their identity, but one of them was suffering so severely. She was having multiple personalities. She was so depressed. But
Hmm.
at the core of it, one is in terms of at a very subtle energy level at Ashwasan, when you work with her, that brought about a dramatic change. Number
Hmm.
two, as that happened, as Dr. Harish said, people who are depressed don't have willpower. You can't tell them have willpower, do exercise. They don't have the willpower, right? What do you do about that? So the first step is to bring about that shift so that they can go to a higher level where they can exercise some amount of self. So at Ashwasan, that's what we call as the subtle energy sessions that we do with them to bring
Hmm.
them to that stage. They say, ha, now I want to do something for myself. Then when you go through an inward journey, Devika,
Hmm.
there's something called as an inward journey where you start looking at yourself, introspecting, start looking at your emotions, say, hey, I'm angry now. Before people who never know they're angry, they just fly off the handle. But now you're like, hey, I'm angry now. Why am I angry? What caused that anger? Okay, my mother said something. But why am I angry at that? Right? So as you go deeper and deeper and deeper in an experiential manner, you start rewiring your brain automatically.
Yeah. So this example you gave just now, Ravi. There's in NVC basically we look at I'm feeling this anger, but I'm feeling it because I have some need which is not being met, and that's why I'm feeling this anger. So then you stop blaming the person outside,
Correct.
right, for
Correct.
it, and you take responsibility. So this
Yes.
owning that
Yes.
feeling and owning the capability of changing how you react to that feeling,
Absolutely.
is what you're talking about. Okay,
Yes.
wonderful. That's great. Thank you. There's a question from the audience which I'd like to take. This is how do we address the issue of whether to let my manager know if I have a mental health diagnosis? Will my manager think I'm incompetent? Letting them know might be an issue. Okay, so let's. I think we should all answer this question. So, Dr. Harish, would you like to? Would you like to?
And this is a very important question. I think
Yes, it is.
all
It
our
is.
perspective will be important. Yes.
Yeah.
There are three ways. There are three ways. One is the employee should share with the manager exactly what is happening to him. The psychiatrist who's treating the manager should give a perspective to the entire problem. Then the senior managers are not scared. They understand the entire illness in a perspective. That's so important. The psychologist, if he or she is involved, or an MSW or a family doctor, should also give a perspective. And these perspectives should be interlinked, and each one should know what the other is doing. At the same time, the manager, the senior manager will come up with only myths. He is wearing good clothes. He's eating well and he's also laughing in the canteen. I don't think anything is wrong with him. So here, a continuous conversation without debunking the manager.
Mm.
Remember, we are in an era where mental health understanding is at its infancy in one way. In the other way, we have a lot of ancestral, historic knowledge about the mind, which Ravi is speaking about. So be very compassionate to the manager who throws myths at you. Or he or she might say, I think this is all acting. He has not performed well for the last 6 months. This is just one of the ways of handling this. Don't get angry at the manager. The psychiatrists and the psychologists are not only mental health professionals, but they have to be mental health missionaries at this point of time in life in India. And they should again go back and then let the myths come up and slowly, gently explain to the manager so that we dent these myths. Once the myths are dented, compassion flows, karuna flows. And that
Thank you.
is the most important thing. And lastly, the manager should not take decisions independently. Confidentiality is an American term. We have in schools, in colleges, in families, we have shared confidentiality. The person who's ill allows the manager to share his concerns with the senior manager so that we can do a lot for the person who's ill. So
Hmm.
shared confidentiality executed in the most sensitive manner, and clarifying the myths very compassionately to the manager who's very angry at the fact that this guy is mentally ill are the two most important things, with the mental health professional, the psychologist, and the patient giving perspective to the entire problem.
Yeah, that compassion though will come only with education and increased information, isn't it?
Yeah, and experience. See, no manager is bad. No
Yeah.
teacher is bad in a school. No manager is bad. It is how you put across, and it is how you respect
Hmm.
and acknowledge that people have a lot of myths about mental health and mental illness. And it's our job at this point of time in India not to be only mental health technicians, but to be mental health missionaries.
Missionaries, lovely evangelists.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love
Well,
that.
that word gives a different twist, but
Yes,
I
absolutely.
love that both
Yes.
the words. I mean, they're so appropriate for our
Okay,
time.
Ravi, what do you have to say about this?
Okay, I think there are two or three points which I want to bring about. One is, if I'm having a mental health problem, if I'm afraid, if I'm worried, if I look at it and say, oh my God, what's going to happen? Chances are when I go and communicate that to my boss, I'll probably do it in a very, very inappropriate manner. Right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it all starts with us. So, I mean, what one has to have the perspective that yes, I have a mental health problem. Yes, it's just like physical health. I'm not well and I need help. That has to be should be devoid of any guilt or any fear. It has to be like
Yeah,
I
I
want to
think
seek help.
guilt, fear, shame,
It
these
should
are these
not
are
be
all
there.
emotions. Yeah.
Should Yeah, you should come to terms with that. I mean, that's one. Second, you may say that yeah, it's difficult to come to terms with that, and I agree. So that's why I would urge every organization to have tie-ups with external mental health evangelists, compassionate people, or whatever, so that people can talk to those people and get solace, get guidance, at least in this in this aspect, and like our founder says, right? I mean, Rashmi, she says, and love is where it begins. And I love the word compassion. So it's all about love, compassion, creating a safe environment where I tell people that, you know what, you matter. Your health matters. Your happiness matters. You know what? 90% of the problem is solved if you can create that environment of I care for you.
Yeah, people first.
People first. I mean,
Yeah,
it cannot be a kind of a cliche, or it has to
right.
be felt from the heart.
Yeah.
And
In
organization,
fact,
I would suggest they should have tie-ups with various professionals, organizations who can really, really make a difference just by listening.
yeah.
90% of the problem can be solved by just
I-
actively listening.
I'm so pleased to hear you say that because the National HRD Network has a mental health campaign called Mind Matters, and
Mhm.
the first time it was run out, that the tagline was "Ask, Listen, Share."
Absolutely, bingo. I
So that
agree.
was
So
that
true.
was like such a beautiful tagline that they had
Yes,
for
yes,
that, right? And part of the work that Mind Matters is doing is just what you both are saying, actually. Getting organizations to look at mental health as a strategic priority,
yes,
to try and normalize mental health conversations or conversations around mental health, in the workplace. Make it a normal thing and not like a oh my god conversation.
yes.
Yeah. So those are really, that's really a journey that every organization should be on. And it's not a quick fix. I think it starts at the top, like Dr. Harish said. The leaders have to buy into this. The leaders have to walk the talk and put in place the practices and the foundation for permitting such openness and building the trust, really. Or you need trust, right? So for a manager to be
Yeah,
able to tell your manager something like this, you need to have trust that you
yeah.
will not be shot for telling this.
Or it
Right.
shows up in your appraisal.
That's right. Or issues in your appraisal. There's one, we're coming to the end of the session, unfortunately. There's one question that I'd like to take. Uh, Somebody's asked, shouldn't mental health be included in school curricula as well? What are your thoughts, Dr. Shetty and Mr. Ramamurthy? Was the question.
Absolutely, absolutely. As we teach children how to Swachh Bharat Abhiyan,
Hmm.
actually Swachh Bharat Abhiyan should have a mental health component.
Yeah.
And because it's not about Swachh Bharat, it's about mind and body itself. So I have written to the Prime Minister that we need to have mental health campaigns at the level of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan.
Hmm.
And so in schools, many schools are teaching life skills very early. But we need to look at Indian schools. There are 15 lakh Indian schools, of which 24,000 schools are CBSE. We need to look at the different areas, and we need to look at physical health, which can cause mental health problems. Anemia can cause mental health problems. Thyroid issues can cause mental health problems. So schools should have yoga compulsory, because if you have geography and maths compulsory, yoga compulsory, school should have life skills. Putting it in the curriculum is important, but it should not become only a theory subject. It should be a
Hmm.
subject which is transacted in the classroom. And that I think would be very, very important. Health should start very early. Yoga can start at the age of 3 and can go on
Yeah.
till you are in the tomb.
And the self-awareness that Ravi was talking about, right, can start. You don't have to wait until your managers to start self-awareness, right, or till your adults. Can start as children.
Yes, yes,
So and I had asked a question earlier about how can we exhibit these behaviors at the workplace, and extending that to family and social circles, right, to your family, your friends, your society at large, right. Perhaps education at the school level and college level will help to normalize conversations, do you think, around mental health, and bring it to the front
Absolutely.
earlier?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're asking me, asking Ravi.
Both of you, actually.
yeah.
Dr. Ravi, you can go first.
Sure, sure. No, I think to add on to Dr. Harish, very well put. Here I want to bring out the nuanced difference between uh, what we learn. We learn, right? I mean, we're used to learning. I learn
Hmm.
maths, I learn physics, I learn chemistry, I learn. But there's an opposite to that, which is called unlearning.
Mm.
Unlearning is cleaning yourself and making your vessel empty so that you can learn more and different things. So at Ashwasan, what we do is a very important practice called how do we do unlearning. And unlearning is never theoretical. Unlearning is always experiential. So to add on to what Dr. Harish said, yes, we should teach this in school, but not learning. It has to be an experiential journey. I mean, you can't teach students about emotions. You got to make them experience. You got to make them share. You got to make them talk. You got to do things in a way that they unlearn the wrong concepts they have learned, right?
Mm.
And
Mm.
create the right environment for them
Yeah.
to be good citizens in a family or in a corporate or of the country.
Thank you, Ravi. Before we end this session, I want Dr. Harish to just bust a couple of misconceptions that all of us, may have, which is really, if you could just clarify who are the different mental health professionals, Dr. Harish, and what is
Yeah.
what is each professional's role in addressing issues?
There can be a counselor who deals with the minor psychological issues, has to have at least a master's in psychology. There could be a psychotherapist who has been trained in different forms of psychotherapy. There could be a yoga therapist also for issues of the mind. There could be a psychiatrist who provides medications, and those who are trained in psychotherapy can provide psychotherapy. So we need a holistic understanding. We have medical social workers who are trained in mental health, and they're known as PSWs, psychiatric social workers,
So who can
and so many
diagnose?
others. But
Who can diagnose? Can these people diagnose an illness?
no, no, no. The psychologist who's trained with a master's and an MPhil or a PhD, and a psychiatrist who has at least a diploma in psychological medicine after MBBS and a doctorate of medicine can officially diagnose. But we need an army of mental health soldiers who are part of the entire army, because if malaria and dengue can be managed by health workers across the
Hmm.
country, we need to build an army of mental health workers who can manage little mental health issues, but they cannot counsel and they cannot be psychologists. So we need a whole hierarchy where at the apex you have trained psychologists and trained psychiatrists, and you have also the sections and sectors where others could manage a small problem. These things are now being handled by Niti Aayog, and they are slowly classifying different professionals based on the expertise. It will take a
Yes,
long time,
I was so
but
glad to
very
see the
important.
in the budget recently. I was so glad to see that the government has put their money where their mouth is. Really, isn't it this year? And I'm glad to see that. I'm just
But at
hoping.
the same time, just one line. At the same time, we should see to it that it does not become top heavy.
Yes.
It has to
Well,
address
I
the
don't know,
issue.
Dr. Harish. They're saying there's like half a psychiatrist for every 2 million people or something
No,
in this
I'm not. I'm
Rajasthan.
not.
Like,
Yes, yes. I'm not speaking about the budget
uh,
or the hub. But the point is, we need to build a system which can address issues in our country.
in
We
our
cannot
country.
have
So,
a system.
what you're saying and what I think Ravi also was saying earlier was that in organizations we need to build capacity to address
Yes,
these also within,
Yeah, I
right?
agree. Agreed. Organizations need to build it. I mean, it can't be just the role of the government.
and inclusive mental health policies.
Yeah,
Okay,
agreed.
that's true. Thank you so much, both of you,
Thank you.
for this
Thank you,
wonderful
Devika. Thank you, Dr.
session.
Rishi. Thank you.
And I urge the people in the audience, I urge you, if your organizations have not already started on this journey, to take the very very important points that Ravi and Dr. Harish have shared with us, and there's no better time to start than now.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much for joining us today.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Dr.
Isha,
Devika, Dr.
over to
Harish,
you.
Anisha.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
Ravi.
ma'am.
Thank
I
you,
have
Joe.
one word.
All the best
Bye.
here.
I just have one word, that is wow. That was indeed a much required session. Like, all I can sum up and just say, it's okay to not to be not okay at times. So I
Yeah,
think that
yeah.
we should all introspect ourselves and our feelings and thoughts, and we should strongly talk about it. It was indeed a pleasure to have the three of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. was
Thank
good
you.
to be here.
Next up, we have two research paper presentations, which would be running simultaneously by our Singapore team. So, dear participants, I request you to join the session of your choice. Thank you so much for being so energetic throughout.